So it's been months since this happened, but it was on my mind today, and I can't believe that I didn't post this sooner, to be honest. So back in winter, I had returned home to NYC and was getting used to the usual schlep on the subway to get to and from work and around the city in general. I hate the subway as an overarching sentiment towards the MTA, and I'd always called it the bane of my existence because it challenged me in all the areas I'm sensitive about. Close proximity to strangers, claustrophobic spaces, temperature extremes, mysteriously foul smells, pests and vermins. Overall, it's convenient and tolerable on a good day, but I still had my fair share of unfortunate encounters over the years that led me to regard the subway as a less than ideal mode of transportation around the city. This one early evening on a Sunday solidified my thinking on this, though. So I had just left a breast cancer fundraiser event around 7 p.m. and was only going a few stops over to where my house was on the N train. My little sister and I sat chatting quietly as the train began to move. A medium-built black man with a grey peacoat and a beanie made eye contact with me and hurried over. He bent down close to my face, extending his arm out for a handshake and said, "Hello there, you're very beautiful. How are you doing and what's your name?" I sort of just recoiled back, giving him a confused, "What are you doing in my personal space?" look, shaking my head in clear disinterest to make his acquaintance. All of a sudden, it was like a switch flipped and his previously sweet tone turned to an ugly rage. He said, "You fucking bitch, you think you're better than everybody? You ain't shit, you ugly bitch. Clown-ass bitch," and he screamed at the top of his lungs, and I noticed everyone turning and just staring in our direction. He made a waving off gesture while I just kind of sat there staring at him, wide-eyed, just wondering what he was going to do next. His entire stance was really aggressive too. He then stopped screaming and, to my surprise, made a direct pass to try the exact same thing on my sister who was right next to me. "Wow, you're beautiful too. Can I shake your hand?" And he reached directly next to me to touch her. I mean, the fucking nerve of this guy. I extended my arm and said firmly, "Hey, leave my sister alone and back up out of our space." And this guy smacks my hand out of the way. And now, he's fully pushed my buttons, and I stand up and I realize that I'm about eye level with him. So, he must have been around 5'9", maybe 5'11" at most. I tell him, "Don't fucking touch my sister," and I was officially heated at this point. This next part is a blur, as I don't remember what he said when he pushed me and we began to scuffle, but I landed a very sweet uppercut on his jaw. This enraged him, and he had me on my back within seconds, kicking me and screaming, "I'm going to fucking kill you, bitch." After what felt like an eternity, two good people of the subway had run up behind him and grabbed him off of me. I heard one guy say, "Leave her alone, dude, what the fuck?" And when I looked up, I saw several horrified passengers just staring at us as we engaged in a full-on brawl. Adrenaline was pumping through my veins, so everything was bright and my vision was pinpoint, and I felt numb. The conductor said something over the speakers about holding the train at the platform, and I stood there shaking as the guys threw him onto the platform and made a barrier between the platform and the door as he attempted to get back into the car, clawing at the air and sputtering curses at me, staring me dead in the eye. The subway doors finally closed, locking him out, and he pounded on the doors as though possessed by a demon or something, screaming so loud that you could see every sinew in his neck as he pounded on the glass. His eyes were also so bloodshot that they almost glowed red, and his voice so loud that it pierced through the entire car. He was still screaming, "I'll kill you, bitch." Then, the subway car just pulled away from the station. Someone pointed to the ground, and apparently he had dropped his cell phone in the altercation. It was unlocked. I found out everything that I could about this crazed stranger. His name, his social media handles, saw all of his selfies, the fact that he's been trying very hard and was unsuccessful at getting laid. His text messages revealed that he was a drug dealer of some sort too. I suspected crack because of the prices, increments, and the wording of the text, which kind of also explained his violent outburst, I guess. I had seen my fair share of crazy in New York City before, but it hadn't got up this close and personal in years. so I was shook and emotional following the attack. I went to the police station with my aunt and uncle soon after, and I was filing a report when one of the cops at the station said to me, "If it turns out that you stole this phone from this guy, you're going to be in a lot of trouble." Dead ass straight to my face, implying that I stole this phone from a complete stranger on the subway and was now spinning some elaborate web that included turning myself in at the police station. When I was filing a report of an assault, mind you, too. And I wasn't wrong in thinking that this guy wasn't going to be much help. I digress, though. I gave them his full name, and they said that they had a lot of people in the system with the same name. I said, well, I have all of his specific information that I got off the phone, and they said that they couldn't use anything off of the phone without a warrant. They ended up taking his cell phone from me, and nothing just ever really came from it, except for the ginormous bruise that I had from getting a blunt kick to the thigh. An officer did come to my house a few months later with some photos of extremely similar-looking black men, none of which I could confidently identify as my assailant. And I haven't heard a single thing since I filed the report, and I couldn't find the guy on social media again. So, this lunatic is out there probably riding the subway somewhere, just waiting for the next girl to reject a handshake so that he can go absolutely batshit crazy again. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened had it been late at night with nobody around to help me. That guy was screaming that he was going to kill me, and I'm sure that he would have, given the chance. This is probably going to be long, so please bear with me as this story has a lot of details. The reason I wanted to share my experience is because I know a lot of people have, at one time or another in their lives, dealt with someone who was either super creepy or that person began to stalk them. So, here it goes. Here's a short history of how this all began. When I was about 16, my mother told me a friend of hers needed a babysitter, and I was more than willing to take the job because I could always use the extra cash. I have a very close relationship with my mother too, so I had complete trust in this friend of hers, since my mother doesn't trust just anyone. So I began to babysit for her 10 and 7-year-old daughters. The oldest had a major attitude, but after I had become their regular sitter, she wasn't as difficult to deal with. If you're curious as to why I'm sharing this, it's a vital detail to this story. So, let's fast forward several years. I'm about 19 years of age now, and I know this because I had graduated high school the year before. This was a major deal in my life, so it was all very vivid in my mind, and I hadn't babysat for this family for about 2 years by this time, I think. I was pretty busy with going to college, working my part-time job, and spending spare time with family and close friends. One day, my mother approaches me and asks if I'd be willing to befriend a girl that her parents felt needed socialization. She gave me a few details before I decided on what to do. She told me that the girl that she wanted me to befriend was one of the girls that I used to sit for. I asked her who she was referring to because I sat for several families when I was a full-time sitter. She told me who it was, and I was slightly hesitant because of the attitude she had when I first met her, but I was always open to helping other people in any way that I could. And so, I began to get together with her every once in a while. I would invite her to small gatherings with some of my friends, but only if there was other younger ones with us, like their little sisters or something. I was always in groups of people of various ages, usually around the age of 13 plus, and always with both guys and girls. My older friends and I were sort of the big sisters of the group, so that's why we were always happy to have those type of get-togethers and all. So she always opened up to me, and she began to share with me that she was dealing with depression and often felt that she was unloved by her family and friends. She also told me that she had contemplated ending it all and was cutting herself. And well, the reason why I took her more than the other younger ones is because I had dealt with those exact same thoughts and feelings when I was around her age. So I wanted to do my best to give her a listening ear and a shoulder to learn on. I would give her some advice, anything that I thought would benefit her and all, and once she felt that she could trust me, I tried to broaden her horizon, but things slowly would take a strange and eventually sinister turn. Now, when I would try to invite her to our usual get-together or social events, she seemed very standoffish. I was a little surprised, but not too much because I knew how difficult things were for her, and it did take her some time to warm up to people. Eventually, she began to try and drag me along with her when she had one of her I don't want to be here attitudes. For example, we would go to the house of another friend of mine. There would be maybe 6 or 8 of us total, and we would watch movies or do something else. This was before the days of social media and the everyone has a cell phone era. She seemed to want to go, but as soon as we got to wherever it was, she just wanted to leave. She would pull me aside and say, "I don't want to be here, let's go." Well, at first I was kind and would tell her, "Come on, let's just stay for a little while, and if you still don't want to stay, then we can leave." I soon learned that she didn't want to stay, even if we were all having a great time together. Eventually, she kept pulling me aside whenever we were in a group setting too. So I just eventually stopped inviting her altogether because all she wanted to do was leave, no matter what the circumstances were. I mention this because it's another vital part of the story. So I would just spend time with her every once in a while, just her and I, and she began to call me on a daily basis. It started with 2 or 3 times a day, and eventually it got up to something like 7 or 10 times every single day. As I said before, at this time in my life I was always extremely busy, so I wasn't always home. I had my own telephone landline because I was able to pay for it myself, and I also had an answering machine. Not voicemail because I was too cheap to pay for a feature that I didn't need. Anyway, I would have to change the tapes way too often because of how much she would call me and leave messages after messages. She would leave messages like, "Where are you? Why aren't you answering my phone calls? Who are you with?" And that was just a little too weird for me. Even when I told her that I wasn't always home until late in the evening or nighttime and all she had to do was just leave one message, as soon as I was home, I'd return all of the messages that I had for the day, and that just didn't deter her from continuing to do this day after day. I began to get really annoyed, but stupid me didn't listen to my gut instincts. I kept telling myself that she just needs a friend and that it's not her fault. But boy, would I soon learn that that was just not the case. Eventually, I kind of drifted away from her a bit. Not intentionally, just because things in life seemed to speed up and I was even busier than before. I would have very few times that I could get together with a friend or two, possibly going out to eat or whatever, shopping in a mall or maybe seeing a movie, but out of nowhere, she began showing up wherever I was. And no, I didn't tell her where I was going or who I was with. Like I said, I had pretty much drifted away from spending time with her. We lived in a pretty big suburb too, so it's not like it would have been that easy for her to know where to find me and all. I began to get pretty creeped out too, because I thought it was way too coincidental that she was just everywhere I was when I would be doing anything recreational. She even found out where I worked and what college I was going to, something that I never told her. She was obviously not college age, so why was she even at my college campus with her mother? She wasn't even in high school yet. But this isn't even the creepiest part. There's way more to this story. So when I was on break from college, I had some time to spend with family and close friends. I did get together with her a couple of times, still not listening to the creep meter I had going off. I was stupid. And, well, things took an even more weird and unexplainable turn. She would ask to spend the night, and I didn't really do sleepovers anymore since I was of age and pretty much leading my own life. But she was still a young one, so I would invite her once in a while to stay over. Somehow, and I have no memory of how this happened, but she just wouldn't leave. It's like she just slept over one night and then just never left. Trust me, there was definitely not an open invitation for her to stay long term, and I had told her that she couldn't stay with me because she had her own life and so did I. And she got very angry with me and for several days refused to leave. Thankfully, I was still living at home and my mum had to step in and pretty much tell her bluntly to just get out. She had a little temper tantrum that night, but she did end up leaving, thankfully. But by this time, I had been fed up with her irrational and erratic behavior. I was avoiding her like the plague, in fact, and I didn't call her back if she was somewhere I was. I would duck into hiding, and I tried to lose her in the crowd, so to speak. That didn't stop her from increasing her strange behavior, though, and her family even did some things that I feel sort of helped her to stalk me more, too. Now, this is not something I'm making up, and this actually happened to me. She moved to a street around the corner from where I live. Her and her family moved into a house which, from her living room window, you could see directly into our backyard, and from there, you could see the window to my bedroom. And yes, this actually happened. I only know this because I found out where she had moved, and my mum was still friends with her mother, so I remember going over there once when she wasn't home, and when I looked out their living room window, I could see our house, my bedroom window from our backyard. And mind you, we had a chain link fence, so you could see everything. When I saw it too, I got some real chills, and when I got home, I informed my mum, who was so busy socializing that she didn't even notice. That's when my mother tried to talk to her mum and tell her about the situation, and her parents both just ignored my mum's warnings. When my mum tried to ask them to talk to her about backing off a little, and well, that didn't happen at all. Things just escalated from there too. Her mum tried to convince me to stay friends with her, in fact, and wanted to pretty much just pawn her daughter off onto me. I don't even remember what she said to try and convince me. I just remember saying to myself, "Okay, lady, you're just as nuts as your daughter." And it wasn't long before the most sinister and disturbing part happened. And this was definitely the last straw. So, I was home alone one day, and she was still living in the Stalker house, so this had to be how she knew that I was the only one home. I wasn't talking to her at this stage, and I even changed my phone number and told my friends to absolutely not give it to her, which they respected and happily obliged. Anyway, as I said, I was home alone. It was maybe about 10 a.m, and I was just getting up to take a shower and get ready to start my day, and as soon as I get out of the shower, I hear the doorbell ring. I didn't think anything of it, and I go to answer the door. I always look through the peephole before I answer the door too. It's something I still do to this day. And I see several police officers just standing there. And I got a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach, thinking that something had happened to one of my family members or something. I answer the door and they ask me, "Are you B?" I answered, "No, she doesn't live here." The officers then ask, "Do you have any identification with you?" Which I answered, "Of course, but it's in the back of the house. I have to go get it." Now, mind you, I'm totally confused as to why they're at my door and why they're asking for my ID. The officer then proceeds to tell me that he has to come in with me when I go into the back of the house. I just nodded in agreement, but still confused as to what was going on. So, we get into my bedroom and I grab my ID and I show the officer who I am. He just says, "Okay, thank you. May we sit down for a moment and talk to you?" I of course agreed and motioned him back into the living room where the other officers have joined us. We sit down and they tell me that they received an anonymous phone call that there was a young lady that lived at my address by the name of B that was extremely suicidal and may have already taken her life. I just sat there for a moment in complete shock, and I told them that she used to be a friend of mine, but that I hadn't talked to her in quite a while, but that she absolutely did not live there. They asked me if I had any contact information for where she was. Thankfully, I still had her info on hand. I then give them her contact information, a telephone number and home address, and they thanked me for my time and just left. And I honestly thought that that was the end of it. But it wasn't. Not by a long shot. Again, I apologize for the length, but this is all important for me to get out. So after they leave, I called my mum immediately, and she proceeded to tell me to come to her workplace until I had to go to my classes for the day. I hightailed it and drove to her office since she owned the business. It was no problem for me to stay there for a few hours or anything, so I stayed there until I had to go to classes and then went on to the rest of the day, although I was still shaken a bit, I must admit. The rest of this story is from third-party perspective, and all of my close friends knew about this situation by this time because her behavior was just way too psychotic for me, and I was going to do whatever I needed to do so I would be safe. So I believe a few friends of mine and myself were at a coffee shop, one of the internet cafes from back in the day, and we were talking when another mutual friend walks in and comes right up to us, looks at me and says, "I have to tell you something." I was like, okay, shoot. Apparently, a few days before, they had run into B and they said that she looked eerily exactly like me. My jaw dropped and I asked, "What do you mean?" "We in no way look similar, in no way, shape or form. I mean, it wasn't like you would confuse one of us for the other or anything." Well, she had apparently begun to dress very much like me, dyed and styled her hair like mine, wore the same kind of bracelets that I would wear. I had a bit of a thing for friendship bracelets back then, and just apparently looked exactly like me. And I was pretty shocked to say the least. A few nights later, I had been on the phone with a couple of friends of mine, and I had the three-way calling feature where you could call two people at once and all talk to one another. One of the friends on the line had informed me what they had heard about why the suicidal report incident even occurred in the first place. Mind you, this is a few months after the fact, and she had heard from another reliable and trustworthy friend of ours that the reason there was that call, and this is going to blow your mind, is because B had called anonymously saying that a young lady by that name lived at my home and was suicidal. And the reason she did it is because she wanted the police to think that I was her. She gave the police my physical description, and this was before she started looking like me, so they would take me away to a psychiatric ward, and therefore she could take over my life. And now I'm thinking, this girl is super crazy. I don't know how she thought that my family and friends would just allow her to do that, but this is how mentally unstable she was. Now, the timing was kind of perfect for me, and I say that because I was getting ready to move away from the area because I was starting a new job and life had kind of taken me in that direction. My family was moving away with me for obvious reasons, so we in fact did move away, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me because apparently she just got worse and worse over time. She began to harass my close friends, trying to get my whereabouts, like my address, phone number, where I had moved away to. They didn't give her my information since they knew how psychotic she was, and at one point, she even began to stalk the brother of one of my very close guy friends, just so that she could try to intimidate him into telling her where I was. He had to have his grandparents step in because he wasn't of age yet, and I have no idea what happened to that situation from there since I had moved away by then and the internet wasn't like it was today. So, fast forwarding to 2012, mind you, the stalking began around the year 2000. Obviously, since it's 2012, social media is a big thing of course, and I had a Facebook account. I didn't even think of my privacy because to me, all of that was long behind me and I had eventually forgotten about B. But one day, I go to sign on and take a wild guess as to who tried to friend me on Facebook. My heart sank for a second, and then the first thing I did was delete her request and block her fast. Thinking that I had taken care of the eerie online encounter, I was wrong again. She began to have her friends message me, asking me why I didn't accept her request, why did I block her, blah blah blah. I blocked each and every person that contacted me, until the messages just eventually stopped. But we're still not quite to the end yet. Again, sorry that this is long. So, the last run-in I had with her online was when she tried to contact me through every single social media account that I had. Twitter, Instagram, you name it. I blocked her, of course, and she then proceeds to try and make fake accounts using my photo and name. I thought, okay, little Miss Crazy, I'll fix your fanny. As you must know, by now, I am more assertive and didn't take any kind of craziness from anyone. I had all the fake accounts closed by reporting them to the social media outlets, but not before getting as much information as I could, reporting her to the proper authorities too. Thankfully, I had documented everything that had happened in the past and kept it all stored away. What can I say? I'm a pack rat. But once I get the reports out, the contact stopped. I also changed my name that I use on every social media account that I have. Instead of using my legal name, I use an alias instead. This is one thing that she doesn't know about me. No one except for my immediate family knows this little fact. I also put everything on super private and have set some super high security measures too. Now, one last fast forward, May 2016. I turn on my phone like I do every morning, and after my phone loads up, it says no service. I knew that there had to be a mistake, so I called the phone company, asked them why my phone had no service since I just paid my bill, and they looked on their system and proceeded to tell me that in their notes, they received a phone call a few hours earlier that morning from a young lady. They assumed it was me, I guess, and she said that she had a new phone and that the number needed to be transferred to this new phone. When they told her that the name didn't match on the account, somehow, and I have no idea how, she got them to change the name on my account, from my name to hers. I have no idea what she wanted to accomplish by doing this, and even worse, how in the hell she got my number. But I explained that this person was a long-time stalker, that I had reports from the police, and that I have to be protected against her because she's capable of anything. So they asked me to go into their corporate office so that they could change everything back to its original state, as well as put some security measures on the account so that this wouldn't happen again. Now, since then, so far, I haven't had any incidences. I am absolutely on high alert because if she was willing to wait 16 years and still wants to find me, for whatever reason, there is no way in hell that I'm going to let my guard down. The only reason I didn't file a restraining order is because, as far as I know, she does not know where I live and I want to keep it that way. However, if she thinks that I won't ever file one if she does find me, well, she's got another thing coming. So let me start with the backstory. After living in Vancouver, BC from 1984 to 2001, I decided to move home. Mum was getting up in years, and the dumb reasons for leaving the province, they just didn't exist anymore. I was a single mum of a preteen at the time. So I settled into a small town outside of the capital region and worked in daycare. I loved my job, but ended up getting double pneumonia, so had to find different work. So I went back to school, but ended up working as a nanny for a year. So, as I wasn't able to find work anymore, I went back to school and did a course in customer service and call center work. I had a call center job selling the history of Christianity, and when I'd left, they had just published book 6 of 12 book series. So, finally, I was thrilled that I got my dream job. I started part-time, but soon I was being called to fill in for other shifts as employees had their choices of jobs and all. Also, Lewis Craft had a requirement of being able to knit or crochet as well as know most of the product they sold. Because I was moving around from store to store, I often wore my apron home, forgetting that I had my name tag on it and all. This is important for what happened later, because my name tag was a cross-stitch tag, using a rather large alphabet, so my name was easy to see from far away. It was stitched in Torquay on a white background, so it was easy enough to see it. So I got pretty settled to my new job, and I supplement with another part-time job. That paid more and got SSI off my back. During this time, I realized that I had to deal with my alcohol consumption, so I was attending meetings after work, unless I worked at the west end of the city. So one cool late summer night, I'm waiting for the bus to head home after a meeting. I could have walked, but I was just tired, and my boyfriend, now husband, said that he could pick me up, but I said no, that was okay. I didn't mind taking the bus. Little did I know, I wished I had taken him up on this offer. So, I'm sitting at the bus stop just relaxing and listening to music on my Discman. It was either Billy Gilman's Everything and More or Barry Manilow's Greatest Hits of Volume 3. So, the area I live in has some big issues. Prostitution, drug deals, and crime are pretty common here. But it was also where I could find the cheapest rent, so I ended up just staying here. Anyway, I'm minding my business, just listening to tunes and waiting for the bus when this old truck pulls up in front of me. The passenger window rolls down and he says, "Hey crafty gal, want a party? I can hook you up with some good shit." I actually didn't realize he used my name at that point, and my name is a unique name and one you don't hear that often. I tell him, "No, thanks, but I'm not interested." He says, "Come on, it'll be fun." I say, "What part of no don't you understand?" I see the bus and I give a sigh of relief. He sees the bus and pulls away. But he then does the strangest thing. Where I'm waiting, there is this Catholic church, a dead-end lane next to it, and then a community league with a playground and park. He backs his truck up into the dead-end lane and watches as I get on the bus. By this time, I've pulled out my cell and call a boyfriend asking him to meet me at the 7-Eleven. I tell him don't bring the truck and just to walk there, as it'd be faster. My creep radar was going off at this point, and I was in flight or fight mode. Not that you could see it, though. The driver asked me, though, if everything was okay. He must have sensed something was up, so I said that I was being followed, and I stayed next to the driver. The driver saw that I was being followed, in fact, and let me off at the light as it had just turned red so I could cross the road to the 7-Eleven. Now, my boyfriend doesn't do PDA, but he realized what I was doing when I was exaggerating the hug and kiss, etc. He saw the car drive off quite fast, too, and after that, he pretty much picked me up. After a while, I didn't see the vehicle, but winter had set in, so no more evening walks or waiting for the buses after that one. So I put it out of my mind until one spring day I saw this picture of Thomas Svekler on the front page of both major newspapers, and I actually became physically ill. This was that dude in the truck. He was apparently found guilty in murder and acquitted on another charge. He was questioned in several murders and disappearances, and he's currently sentenced as a dangerous offender, which means that he'll never get out of rising. I'm thankful that I survived this, but it was definitely a close call.